Welcome to the Nebraska Department of Education's Content Area Standards Implementation Framework. This video is designed to give an overview of the framework as well as outline the roles and responsibilities of stakeholders as content area standards are revised and then implemented in Nebraska's classrooms. Let's welcome Dr. Corey Epler, Chief Academic Officer for the Nebraska Department of Education, as he explains the purpose of the framework.
Over the last 2 years, the Nebraska Department of Education has worked to provide greater transparency around the processes to develop, revise, and ultimately implement our content area standards. Specifically, we've developed a standards timeline that provides information to when different content areas standards will be revised. We've also created a reference guide that talks more about why we develop standards, the history behind standards-based instruction, as well as the quality criteria for Nebraska's content area standards. As we've worked to create those resources, it became apparent that we also needed to provide guidance around implementation. We know that when a new set of standard is revised and ultimately approved by the state board, schools and districts immediately start to think about the implementation. This content area standards framework provides a greater clarity around the who does what when it comes to implementing content area standards. It looks at the stages of implementation of standards over 4 different phases, as well as it clarifies roles and responsibilities for the state, for ESUs, for districts, and for schools as well. It also examines those responsibilities over multiple categories of work. Our hope with this implementation framework is it provides greater guidance and clarity and creates a set of expectations regarding content area standards implementation.
Once the State Board of Education approved new standards, the stage of exploration begins. In this stage, time and activities are centered around building understanding of the newly revised standards, as well as assessing readiness to implement them into classroom instruction. The exploration phase also includes communication strategies to build awareness and guide local decision-making. During the initial implementation, the focus is on analyzing the revised standards at a deeper level. This stage also involves developing resources to support implementation. For example, the need for additional support such as resources, materials, and professional learning are identified. The next phase of implementation, known as scale-up, is focused on refining instructional practices to prepare students for full implementation. During this stage, staff can attend to any gaps in student learning that result from the transition from legacy to revised standards. Finally, in deep implementation and sustainability phase, educators possess a deep understanding of the revised standards and continue working to achieve seamless integration of curriculum, instruction, and assessments. When content area standards are revised, they reflect a number of key shifts that are essential in fulfilling the vision of Nebraska's college and career readiness mission. Throughout each of the phases of standards implementation, Nebraska's educators will play an important role in preparing our students for college, career, and life.
So one of the biggest shifts I noticed from previous standards to now is changing that verb from recognize something to identify and apply, or identify and explain. So that really speaks to the fact that we want students to think about it. Why am I learning this, and how am I going to use it in my learning? A specific example from 3rd grade, instead of telling me characteristics of genre, now we want them to compare and contrast characteristics of a variety of genres. So again, instead of having them memorize a list, it's having them really think about it and find how these pieces are the same, how they're different. Then you can take that same conversation and apply it to their writing. How can I use this in this specific type of writing versus this one? So I think that's a really powerful difference between previous standards and our current ones.
My involvement as an elementary principal has been really a collaborative effort where we've gone with our teachers to different workshops at our ESU, really looked at the standards, broke them down, and tried to see the connection between what we're currently doing and where we're going. So we've been hands-on all along. I think that's what we needed to do so that the teachers understand it's not just them, it's all of us together working to get these standards delivered.
Successful implementation of the content area standards requires a focus on communication across all levels of the educational system. Collective thinking and inquiry are key ingredients to developing a common understanding of the revised standards.
Well, the Omaha Public Schools is a very large district, and in English language arts we have close to 300 teachers, more if you include co-teachers. So building capacity is one of our goals. And so we do have a framework or an organization that we do have instructional leaders in our buildings. We've been working with our principals, with our curriculum specialists, department heads, instructional facilitators, gifted and talented supervisors to educate them on the standards so that then they can utilize them and do a lot of cross-curricular connections.
ESUs will help school districts review to see if what they're doing is currently aligned to the standards, and then what changes do they need to make to fill that gap between the legacy and the revised standards. And then we'll also, as they start using these assessments, go back and help them review that data to see what continued changes they need to make in their instruction as well as their curriculum.
All stakeholders play a role in developing resources that will support the implementation of content area standards. This includes professional learning, curriculum, and instructional materials.
There are some incredible challenges with the adoption of instructional materials to ensure alignment with the new content area standards. In the Norris School District, what we found works and the most functional model is, first of all, to ensure that we start with the new content area standards and do a crosswalk to the materials we're scrutinizing for possible adoption.
When CTE content standards are revised, the state's role is to develop resources we know classroom teachers need. For example, we're developing an extensive repository of online educational resources. We're also extremely committed to working with teachers as they look at high-quality instructional materials that are aligned to our content area standards.
Our vision for the content area standards framework moving forward is that as new standards are revised and approved by the State Board of Education, that the NDE will have ready to go a implementation framework for the content area. The great thing about this framework is that it's customizable, so each content area specialist will be able to customize it for the set of standards that are newly approved, but also districts and ESUs will be able to customize it for the needs of their use as well. So our hope is that it provides greater clarity and that ultimately it leads to greater student learning relative to the standards.